Welcome back to the course. In this lesson, we're going to look at error handling within our Vuex code. To code along, you can check out the starting code at L5-start. In the last lesson, I pointed out how when we create a new event and hit submit, we aren't taken anywhere. Ideally, we would be routed to the event details of the event we just created. So in this lesson, we're going to first take care of that by implementing some new routing behavior, and then we're going to handle the errors that might happen within our Vuex code. To get started with that first task, let's head into the event create component and refresh ourselves on what's happening here. As a reminder, when this form is submitted, we're dispatching the create event action from our Vuex store and passing in the event that we just created. Now, if that event submission were successful, we want to then route to that new event. So we can add that routing behavior here in a then block. We'll say this.router.push, specifying the name of the route that we want to be pushed to, and then we're going to set some params. We'll set the ID to event.id. If route parameters and dynamic segments are new to you, you'll want to check out the Real-World Vue 3 lesson on dynamic routing. But the idea here is that when we push to that new route, we're setting the parameter of that route equal to the event's ID, so that the event details component can have access to that event ID as a prop. That way, as soon as we arrive on the event details component, it's going to dispatch the fetch event action using this.id, which is the prop that was fed in from the route params. Then, once that event is fetched by its ID, our computed property called event returns it so that the template can print out its details. Now we can test out this new routing behavior by creating a dummy event in the create event component. And there it goes. Once we hit submit, we're routed to the event details of the event we just created. Great, so we've accomplished our first step. Now we're ready to implement the error handling throughout our app. If we head into our store file, we can see that in each of these actions, we're catching an error if it happens, and so far as a placeholder, we've put these console logs. But there's some problems with that. First off, your average user is not going to have their developer console open while using your app, so they will never see these errors. So we're going to have to implement a solution where they can actually see the errors that have occurred. And another issue here is that we're catching our errors at the global Vuex level, but we don't necessarily need to do that. It actually makes more sense for the component that triggered the error to handle the error itself. So the error handling solution that we're going to implement has the following steps. First, we're going to create a new component to display errors. This will be an error_display.vue file. Then we need to add that error display component as a route. Then we will enable our Vuex actions to give the error that was caught to the component that triggered it. And finally, we will route the user to that new error display component whenever an error is caught. Since error display will be a page level component that we're going to route to, we're going to add it to the views directory. And this component is going to be quite simple. It just needs a template that prints out the error that was received as a prop. Now that our new error display component is ready, we can add it as a route. We'll import it into our router file. Then we'll add a new route object for it. Take note of how there is a dynamic segment here with the :error. That error is going to be passed in to the error display component as a prop. Again, if this dynamic segment topic is new to you, check out the Real-World Vue 3 dynamic routing lesson. Now that we have this routing set up for displaying the errors, we can figure out that next step where we're taking the error from the action and then giving it to the component that ultimately triggered that error. For example, if a user is creating an event and an error occurs, for example, maybe there's an issue with a network connection, we want the create event action to throw the error that it caught to the event create component, so it too can catch the error and then handle it accordingly. In our use case, we are pushing to that new error display route so our user can see that error. So let's head back into the Vuex store and make some changes. First, in the create event action, we'll give it the ability to throw the error. And in the fetch events action, we also want to throw the error, but first we need to return the event service. and we'll repeat those steps for the fetch event action, returning this event service and throwing the error. With these adjustments in place, the actions are now throwing the errors, which can be caught by the component that triggered it. So first, let's head into the event create component, adding a catch for that error. If an error is caught, we will push to that error display component. So now, if the event was successfully created, we will route to the event details. But if an error is caught, we will push to that error display component. And just to reiterate, whatever error is caught is fed into the error display component as a prop, which then gets displayed. Now we can just repeat this process within the two other components that might generate an error. Let's just copy this catch block, and inside of the event list component, we will paste it onto this fetch events dispatch. Then we'll head inside event details and do the same for the fetch event dispatch. And with that, our error handling is all set up. Now to test that this is working, we're going to force a network error. We'll just head into our event service file and mess up the base URL, giving it the wrong local host. Now, if we check this out in the browser, we should start seeing some errors. And sure enough, we do. On the event list view, we're seeing a network error. And by creating a dummy event and hitting submit, we should also see that error. And there it is. And that brings us to the end of this lesson. In the next and final lesson of the course, we're going to look at some ways to scale up our knowledge of using Vuex for state management. If you're coding along, you can check out the L5-end branch.